Hey, welcome to this week's weekly devotional. We try to release these every Wednesday morning at about 7 a.m. And so if you're listening on YouTube, Facebook, maybe even listening to it in your car on Spotify or some other podcasting app, it would be really great if you would just let us know that you're doing that, or maybe leave a review for the podcast or the YouTube broadcast. But anyway, having said that, I want to remind you that this week we are still continuing our core values series here. And so the thing is, these are not our core beliefs. It's actually a little different than that. You can find our beliefs at greenwood.church/beliefs. What we mean by our core values is more like our mission statement, like how do we operate as a church? And honestly, when we have membership meetings with people, we run through these and we talk about how this is something we hope all of our members will do and be involved in these things, okay? And so today we're going to hit core value number 5 of 6, and today's topic is everyone gives. And it's not exactly what you may be thinking up front. And so I just want to tease you with that. And let's talk about everyone gives. So Psalm 34:7 says, "Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires." And so we like to start off by pointing out that this does not necessarily mean he's going to make you rich and famous, okay? Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. And so the principle that this verse is teaching us is that if we make God the priority in our life, he will take care of us. And we as a church want all of our church members, all of our people, even just maybe people who've attended a couple times, we want you to experience the John 10:10 life that Jesus talked about this abundant, overflowing life. Remember, as a believer, we are looking forward to a future with Christ, but we're all in heaven, but we're also looking at an abundant life in the here and now, a new way of living that gives us something we didn't have before. And so if we make God a priority, he will take care of us. And so one of the ways that we show that we have made God a priority in our life is by giving. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, they want my money. There's more to giving than just money, all right? We like to talk about giving as something that we do with our time and our effort, and yes, our money, but even other resources than that as well. So there are a lot of different ways to give. So I want to move on now and look at a little bit later in Psalm 37. It says, "The wicked borrow and never repay, but the godly are generous givers." And so we want to encourage people to give generously. There is a principle that is often talked about in like Christian financial kind of curriculums and things, but it's usually something about we give from an open hand as believers. And so we don't have to hold things back and hoard because we're afraid we're not going to get any more. We can give freely as believers because we know that God will meet our needs, that he will take care of us. And I've seen that in my life. Like most of us, I started out when Rachel and I got married with just a couple $1,000s at most in the bank. I don't really even remember. And there were some times, we lived in a tiny little apartment at the beginning. And so we started out in a very different place than we are now. God has met our needs. And so it's become easier over the years and at the same time more difficult to give because you start to think as you get older, man, I got to retire one day. I got to pay for this and this with my kids. And I don't know if I can really afford to give. But the thing is, we can, because God will never stop giving us what we need. And so, it may not look like we dreamed about as a kid, that we have, the biggest yacht ever made, or we live in the best house ever. God, again, we talked about at the beginning, God doesn't promise that. He promises to give us what we need, and we can be generous with what he's given us towards others because he'll meet our needs. And so time and effort are things that a lot of us have in abundance. And so we can give those things generously, even if we don't have finances to give generously. Now, we want to look at Matthew 6, 3 through 4. It says, but when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand, this is my left hand, I know it's on the right side of your screen, but don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. So the verse starts out with, when you give to someone in need. So that means that we should be doing it, right? When you give to someone in need. And there's no conditions attached. There are no limitations about this being when you give to someone in need that you actually like, or that, you've verified actually need. When you give to someone in need, and then what's the limitation on how much money or time or energy that the giver has? It doesn't give us any of those. And so the generosity principle from above is in effect here. We give open-handedly. This verse actually does use some figurative language about your hands. Don't let this one know what this one is doing. And the principle there is that we do it in private. Give and don't talk about it a whole lot. It's one thing if the person you gave to talks about it. It's another thing if you are going around telling everybody, well, I took care of this person when they were in need. And so, it's just because, I follow Jesus. Well, when we do that, we're actually getting the reward that we're going to get. When we do things like this in private, the Bible tells us that our reward in heaven is great. And so we want to do that. We want to do these things, this generosity thing. We want to do that privately. We want to just help people. We want to make it a habit of helping people out. And so the reward is in heaven, and we would probably rather enjoy the lavish reward that God gives us. We would prefer that to just a couple people going, oh, wow, yeah, they're a good person. They gave that. And so that's one of the ways that we want to work. Now, there's another way that we're going to talk about generosity too. And so Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, it says this, bring all the tithes into the storehouse so that there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the window of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. And so we've talked previously about how giving, being generous, involves our time, our effort, and yes, it involves our money as well. The tithe is literally 10%. And so that is the way that God prescribed worship in the Old Testament. And in Malachi chapter 3, the people weren't actually doing that. And so he says that the reason that they're not experiencing that full, wonderful life is because they're not actually worshiping God with their money. And that's what this is really about, is worshiping God, making him the priority in your life. And so one of the ways that we do that is by the way that we use the finances he's given us. So we want to bring our tithe to him. And in this verse, talking to some people in around probably about 480 BC, he's telling them, I will open the window of heaven for you. In other words, probably going to send rain for their crops and animals and all the things. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it, put me to the test. And so this is something that when we do this, God promises to meet our needs. You might even say above and beyond what we need, because in my experience, he does meet us above and beyond what we need. Now, it's not always that way, but frequently it is. And so Leviticus 27:30 tells us A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain or soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It's holy to the Lord. It's set apart for God. Proverbs 3, verse 9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. So in the context of the Malachi scripture and the ones that we've just been reading, we see that because the people held back from God, he held back blessings from them. So if we will cheerfully give God our tithe, he will take care of us. If we will cheerfully give of our time, of our resources, of our efforts that we have, God will take care of us. So maybe you're thinking, man, I don't have a whole lot of extra time to give. Well, maybe you have extra in some other area to give. Or maybe you're thinking, I don't know that I can actually give that baseline amount even. I would say, try it. We talk about this in church whenever we bring up giving, is that, we want you to do it for you as an act of worship. Believe it or not, our church is doing fine on money. Yes, we're trying to build a building and all that stuff, but operation, man, we're doing fine. We don't encourage you to give money because we need it or because we get any more money if you do give. We have a set salary, all of us, and so that doesn't change. What does change is the way that our church is able to help people and able to accomplish the mission. And so obviously it works better if we're all involved in that. The other thing I wanted to say is that for me and my personal family, the 5 that I have in my home, we have learned over time that 10% is sort of the beginning for us. And, struggling with putting money first in my life and really not wanting to release that to the Lord. One of the things that God called me to do, I'm not saying you have to do this, but one of the things God asked my family to do is to give above and beyond that. And so some of the things that we give to aren't here at church, but we do feel like we are immensely blessed. And so we want to give over and above what God has asked. And so I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say, it's more than the 10%. And again, we give to the church locally. We give to different ministries. We do some things, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But I would encourage you, if money is something you struggle with, if yielding that over to God is something you struggle with, maybe it's time, maybe it's effort, whatever it is, I would say give more of that to God. Just start saying, okay, I struggle with this area. I admit it. So I'm going to give more of it. And when you do that, I think you'll see that you're set free from that struggle. Yes. But also, I really believe that God will take care of you in ways that you just didn't see coming. And so, I tell you this about Everyone Gives, because I hope we as a church hope that you will experience that abundant life that God gives. Again, we're not promising that you're going to get healthy, wealthy, and wise. But we do think that when we live this generosity way that God has prescribed, that we get to experience God working in us, through us, and we get to live in that abundant life. And so I hope that you'll do that today. If you haven't made that decision before, if it's something you've done, and I pray that you would look for new ways to experience God working through you in generosity. And so I hope that's helpful. Love to talk to you more about that. You can email me, justin@greenwood.church, or you can come find me on a Sunday morning over at the information desk. Y'all have a wonderful week.